I've worked with a special forces guy who's like trained killer, and he's too afraid to like give negative feedback to his wife. He doesn't want to hurt her because there's like all that rage or it's channeled or whatever to execute and kill and hit the target.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to the thing that he cares about the most, he's too afraid to fully just express that.
You're listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and the aim of this podcast is pretty simple: to support you in building rock-solid foundations, legendary integrity, and kick-ass relationships with plenty of stories, a load of lessons, and a solid dose of some loving straight talk. So let's get started. Darren, Bruce, welcome to the Everyday Legends podcast, mate. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, so good to be here, bro. I really appreciate you taking the time.
So, the time we've been chatting, quote off here, about where we'll go, and look, I think we might explore a few things, but for those who listen to this who might not know who you are, or you might be new to them, I want to kind of give them a little bit of insight. And the question that I like to ask is one that, it's fairly open. You can take it wherever you want. And that is, who is Darren Bruce?
Holy shit, that's a hectic question to ask when I've just been reading. Have you read The Untethered Soul?
No.
It's like the freaking whole chapter of it is about like, you keep saying who you are and it's actually not who you are. It's very intangible, spiritual, out there shit. Who am I? I am a lover of life. That's the best way. The first thing that comes to me. I'm a connector. I've always connected people. I just love doing that. I'm super curious and interested in humans, and I've been learning about them, finding out about them and myself for a very long time. Probably at first because I was scared of a lot of things, like a lot of people, and now because I kind of believe in humans and think that we all have the best intentions when we are well, when we are mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially, relationally well.
Nice. I like it. There's definitely some threads we can dive into there. So I'm interested, given what you said to start with in the book that you're reading, is there an untethered soul answer to that question? Or is that it?
I haven't even got to that point, It's and our mutual friend Amber, I interviewed her on my podcast, and we went through the same question where she's talked about how she'll talk to somebody for the first time. A client will come to her as a mentor, and she'll say, "Who are you?" And they'll give her all these answers about, "Oh, I do this as a job, or I'm a husband, or I'm a whatever, I'm a son, or a brother or sister," and none of those things are who we are. And you know what? I think actually the more important question that I've learned is, rather than who am I, because that I feel like that has boxed me in, and that's why I just hate the question, what do you do, and everything, because nobody really gives a shit. That's a way of boxing someone in, or so someone feels like, oh, I can identify and label you as something and move on, rather than actually creating a connection. And even if it's like someone who could actually help that person in what you do, that doesn't fucking matter either in what I do. It's like, can I actually help you? That's not that either. So I think I like, what am I? I am like, I'm energy in this body. I know it's fucking out there, but like, I'm energy in this body, and I have like an opportunity to be whoever I want to be, and I think that's an important thing. I think that's what actually encourages behavioral flexibility and adaptiveness and resilience to unexpected shit that happens for everyone. And that's why I have that perspective.
Nice. So what else comes under that umbrella of what are you?
Well, if you think about the answer I gave, like, I am energy, like it comes back to like, what else comes under the banner of, well, everything I do, what kind of energy am I bringing to that? Like, and then we could talk about values. You know, am I bringing fearful energy, or am I bringing loving energy, am I bringing conditional love energy, or am I bringing unconditionally loving energy? And I think like a big focus of mine in the last couple of years is realizing that I think in my experience, like what I've learned and what most people have learned, they think is unconditionally loving action, or that's something that is completely like they don't see any way in which they can get something in return, and that's only for someone with no expectations. And I think we all just tended to learn, we don't realize that we're starting with what's in it for me. It's like everybody listening to this right now is thinking, what's in it for me? Like, that's great. Like, they might be thinking, what's in it for me so that it can benefit others. That's great. But essentially, like, that's our kind of primal thing to survive. So what's in it for me? And so my process has been like, one of the things I do is like constantly posting value on social media, to even like the most important part is when I don't notice that I can get something back. I can't think of how I'm going to get something in return, because I believe like that's actually, I'm unlearning conditional love actions where, you know, the whole world of business and marketing is like, oh, how can I do this thing so I can get that person to do that? Whereas like that would be completely out of integrity for me, because I'm teaching individuals and couples, people in relationships, to be unconditionally loving. So how could I be a role model of what I want to be for my clients or my kids, or, you know, just me or my friends, community, whatever, if I'm taking those kinds of actions? So, I mean, that's the ultimate energy, I think, is, and, you know, Tony Robbins talks about contribution being the spiritual need that we have, and that's acts of unconditional love. Well, I don't believe that any loving thing is a feeling, that it's an action. And contributing is that is an act of unconditional love, I believe. So that's what I'm just constantly working on. How can I just give and create goodwill? Like, essentially something I realized recently by a dude I'm super inspired by, Alex Hormozy, is literally the only thing that is ever left behind from anyone. That's like, it's brand equity. Like, you think about, we remember Albert Einstein, like, it's the brand that he created. Well, obviously it's like a scientific factual thing, but that's brand equity. So it's like, I just want to leave that brand equity from a perspective of goodwill, like just doing something just because it's like the right thing to do, because it represents being part of all humans who just want to fucking, you know, do good for people and help. And whether I'm still learning that, maybe I am. It's not like I'm.
Yeah. So then, where does that? Because I think this is super interesting, right? Where, because, you know, in that, like, unlearning, right?
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is like I'm unlearning the conditioning that I had around conditional and unconditional love. So where does that leave you when it comes to, you know, certainly from a business standpoint, right? Like I'm working to give without conditions, and then the actual receptivity of some kind of value exchange there, right?
Well, I think
as a business owner and income and revenue and keeping the lights on, so to speak.
Well, I think there's two parts to it. Also, like, rationally thinking that, you know, some people need to be called forward. So that's also can be part of the giving. It's like, actually, you know, and I believe that you do this as well, really, really well. I appreciate how, I think that's like, the saying I've heard before is like piercing people with the truth. So it might be something that somebody doesn't want to hear, or they might actually be like angry because you've said it or something. But I think that's because the truth is burning like dead wood, as Peterson says, like burns the dead wood off inside our body to reveal it. Because I think that the deepest truths piss you off the most, or have me. I want to give you an example in a story, and I haven't told you this because it literally happened this week, and I think it's a really good one, because obviously there's men that listen to this, focused on men, and it's a huge realization and a huge leveling up for me, literally in the last few days, from a perspective as a man, the kind of man I want to be, the goals I want to achieve, and also as a parent as well, but an insight into me as a man and my behavior. So is that cool?
Fire away.
Okay, a few days ago, you know, my daughter, so I'll just call her my daughter. well, last couple of weeks, she's started to physically hit a lot more.
Right.
And we're just navigating that right now. Yeah. And so
just you guys, other kids,
just us.
Yeah. Cool.
But we know that other kids hit at daycare. She had her first, friend come over to the house and he kicked her in the face after like 20 minutes of playing, having the best time. And then she starts crying in her room. He kicked me in the face. But yeah, she's kind of turning on us a bit. So Jess, my wife, like she's hitting her while she's holding the baby.
Yep.
Can't do anything about it. And then, so she came home and she seemed a bit like amped up anyway, like a lot of stuff, something going on. She's really hyper. We went to the trampoline, we were playing, we were holding tennis rackets, and she went whack and she hit me on the hand. And I said to her, "Oh, that hurt. Don't hit me." And she just straight away hit me on the hand again. And it hurt. And I went, "Ah," and I stood up and I grabbed the racket I had and I slammed it down the trampoline. And that was so scary for her, for like, whether it was me yelling or hitting that racket, her seeing or hearing that, she just started crying. And I yelled so loud that Jess came out and thought there was something wrong. Anyway, we go inside and she's still throwing things. She threw a washing basket and it hit Jess, my wife, in the face, and she was crying, bawling her eyes out. So I'm watching both the two females I care the most about in the world, they're just sitting there crying together. And I grabbed the dog because the dog's
but actually crying like together or separate, but both
crying, just
separation there,
crying a meter apart.
Yeah.
Because first she wouldn't like let anyone touch her, and she just kept throwing things around. Anyway, I moved the dog out of the way because the dog's going to bite someone, because that's what dogs do when they cry. And then I'm just sitting there and I'm like experiencing anger towards my daughter a bit, because I'm like, "Fuck, you did that, both these things." To your mum. But then the other half of me is like, well, it's our responsibility to, she might have modeled that behavior from us, or like she needs to learn from us, how to handle this situation. Anyway, that's just to set up the whole learning of this, is that we sorted that out, we repaired, and she went to sleep well. And then the next couple of days, I was talking to a good friend who's, he's a mentor. He's very insightful. And I just told him about what happened. He said, "What were you feeling?" And I said, "I was feeling rage." That was like I was reactive, which I'm not usually like. I imagine you might notice that with me. And so he's like, "Okay, where's the first time you experienced that?" Boom, straight away I go, with my brother. He's about 4. And he used to pin me down, or like he's dunked me in water before I thought I was going to drown. I was swallowing water and super angry at him, and he would hold me under bed covers, and I was claustrophobic, be like, "Let me out." Ironically, literally 40 minutes, and this is the crazy universal synchronistic thing that's happened more than once. He texts me 40 minutes before this conversation and says, because I'd only just told him about that pool thing I just said, because he told me a week ago, "You used to love the pool," because I told him how my daughter loves the pool, and he goes, "Oh, that reminds me of you as a kid." I'm like,
"This is your brother."
And I go, "I have no memory of loving the pool. Like, all I remember is you dunking me in that water, and I hated the water." So there's like a massive insight to like how our brain like deletes stuff just to keep us safe.
And then focuses on other things.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I've got heaps of stories I can tell of, I've told, I got caught in a rip, lifeguard saved my life, swimming against the rip to exhaustion, and those are my associations, or those are the memories I have of being in water. And anyway, so me and my mate have this conversation, and I come to the realization that the rage that I was reactive with is the thing that like I have hidden or avoided feeling because of fear of like hurting someone, because I know how fucking powerful I was when I would use this with my brother, and growing up with 2 sisters as well, like, and them probably like being scared of that as well, just because, boys tend to be more rough than girls, and I'm generalizing. But my big realization was that even my rage, like hiding that was actually the thing that resulted in me not being able to handle that situation with my daughter. And I've noticed the same thing when I might like get annoyed with my wife or whatever. It's like, basically I learned that that's not okay to feel that when it's a normal thing that I'm experiencing. And I know, and I teach, that any single emotion or anything can be used as a tool, like a productive tool. But people don't learn how to use those emotions in productive ways, like a tool, then they'll burn the whole village down, so to speak, or whatever. And I think that's a big fear of a lot of men, because, I've worked with the special forces guys, like trained killer, and he's too afraid to like give negative feedback to his wife or something, he doesn't want to hurt her, because there's like all that rage, it's channeled or whatever to execute and kill and hit the target. But then when it comes to the thing that he cares about the most, and nurturing, which is a reflection of the little boy in him that he's dealing with in that moment, he's like too afraid to fully just express that. And the other massive learning was that was attached to competitiveness. Like, I used to be super competitive, but that was attached to that rage. So when I thought that rage is a bad thing, don't do it, then my competitiveness of taking massive action, achieving results that support me, my independence, support my family, whether it's business, physical, etc., whatever, that I was like holding back on how much I can actually do, how much I can actually be. Literally just within, and from that conversation, that realization, I just was so energized. Like I noticed the difference in how much energy I had. And there's like a clear difference in this from that realization. And I guess I wanted to say that because that's essentially, the first basic rule is like, you are the only one holding yourself back from anything you want. Like, you have problems you want because they keep you safe in familiar territory. And I think unraveling this sort of stuff is what allows to like feel safe to go on the journey to, the next level of not just achieve, but
navigating shitty situations, like when your daughter hits you on the hand with a tennis racket twice. And it's one of those things, I suppose, where I would say our aim isn't to like intensely analyze every situation that we get into, but things that are certainly more heightened like that, like, the problem is often not the problem. There's usually something deeper beneath this. And so where can I actually, explore in that to see something that might have both resulted in this and help me in situations similar to this or different? As you see, like that's you've got a toddler and then a new baby, you've also got a partner, and you're a human who deals with other humans. So these kinds of challenging situations certainly can arise. So, and I love this idea of anger is sad's bodyguard, and I think it kind of can expand itself to many other things. Like rage is clearly the thing there, but what I'm hearing as well, and what you shared with those situations with your brother, was it sound like rage was a response to what sounded like kind of powerlessness or helplessness or something like that. Hey, a quick interruption from me on this one. I'll keep it brief, I promise, and that's this. If you want to hear more from me, not only the deeper content where I go into some stories and some examples and some real education in depth, right? I love these podcasts, but we can go into depth, and that is in my weekly email newsletter, Mic Drops. That's what I call it. That's where I drop the mic and I drop all of my knowledge, my own stories, how I navigate shit, the stories of men that I work with and these things in my life to support you in getting your best, getting past your shit, and getting more from life, love, and the everyday. So wherever you find this podcast, find the link, subscribe to the newsletter, and I'll see you in there soon. And by the way, that's where you can interact with me directly. Just reply to emails and we can have a conversation. All right, back to the episode. Is that accurate?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Like I love what you said about anger is sad's bodyguard. And I would go further to say that fear is sad's armor beneath the bodyguard. Beneath fear is sad's armor behind the bodyguard. I think that's really like, I always think about fear is the driving emotion behind all of those other ones. It's really that thing. Yeah. So it was definitely, I think there was definitely sadness as well from the absence of connection with my brother as a result of that. That happened for, I mentioned a little bit to you before, where like we're never close until we started to like understand each other and stop fucking. I judged him for so long, and the whole time I was judging him, he was like, he had 3 years of non-stop fights at school, getting physically hit and abused with no way of coping mechanisms other than smoking weed for 12 years straight every day. And I judged him the whole time. The whole time I judged him, he was like in the most pain. And so
and you were probably copying a little bit of that. And then also, as you said, there was some unprocessed rage and helplessness and all that shit in you. And so it just kind of compounds it all, right? So then skip forward to now. Tomorrow, that same situation happens with your daughter on the trampoline. What does that look like for you? Or so that might be question A, and there might be a sub one to that, which is at the back of that conversation, is it also inviting you to actually now explore some of that rage? So it isn't still kind of in there,
100%.
waiting to pop?
The first answer is I undoubtedly know that I'd handle that situation calmly. Like I've already pictured it in my head and I know exactly what I'd do. And it's because of this awareness of where that, disowned sort of part of me, that feeling and that rage, it's because of that. And that's why I'm so certain about what was going on there, because I know exactly what I do now. And this comes back to like when I was a child, it was okay to be raged. I need to be playful and childlike with her and redirect the attention to, that's all just energy that she has that she wants to use and get out. There's the mirror for me is like, oh, I see rage in her. We need to stop that, rather than me knowing every behavior is okay. It's normal, but how can we use it as a resource, as a tool, like I said? So yeah. And this has been the massive insight into me to like actually discover and really relearn. I even did this with Jess, my wife. Like we made a huge list of like, what are all the things you love doing as a kid? That's what's come out of this as well. And it's massive insights to like, that's how we bring the playfulness into the environment at home or everywhere for us, which allows us to take authentic action, not something that we learned or we were taught how to think, or that, adult responsibilities distracts us and we act from fear. That we're authentic and we're childlike, and then that rubs off on her. And we also take that like playful action, even in the face of something that might seem like scary or whatever. If we can meet that playfulness, then it completely transforms the experience. Like I already know that I would like pull the couch mats out and get her to start rolling and doing jumps and stuff like that with me. And so, yes, that's what I do. And you asked about actions, 100%. I'm today I was like in the gym, and this is that piece of competitiveness that I was telling you about. Like I'm hyper focused on pushing to the max, because I think what happens with a lot of people, men, women, like that I've observed, and my experience is like go through this big, if we experience like some personal growth, I feel like there's this massive overcorrection. So for me, it was like, I would always say I'm numb on the inside. That was my 20s. Like I had no emotional intelligence, awareness of what is emotion, why am I feeling it, blah, blah, blah. And now I went through this experience of like actually going through all that pain and accepting all of that, or now or constant learning, the rage. But the overcorrection was like, well, yeah, as a man, I think a man needs to fucking dominate and go out and do things and achieve things, obviously without sacrificing fulfillment and presence to, emotions that might make him reactive and dangerous. That like just my focus is so much more on that. And I think channeling that energy in that way is exactly what I needed, because it's been too much of the presence and meditating under a tree and all this shit. It's like, and I don't like the word balance. I like the word integration. Like how am I integrating the intensity and the energy that my body wants to use with the presence and the unconditional love and those actions. So yeah, it's just, there's heaps of ideas coming to me. I think the big learning is like the water is very symbolic of,
Yeah.
being okay with everything I'm feeling. So I think the big call to me is like doing more in the water. Like there's a swim squad I've heard about that I might join, all these different sorts of things that I do in the water. I think that whether it's on the ground, on land or water, that's what's going to be the resourceful way to use all that. So I can come home and use that energy, ironically, just like my daughter. And yeah, I'm better for everyone there. And like we said, I said to you, people need to be called forward, and that's part of an authentic. That's a channeling of the rage as well. I think like conversations, and I think a big challenge there is like that takes being disagreeable when we might not naturally be that. Like I'm not. I've done the test, and I've talked about that. But my wife is 5% agreeable, so she's super awesome at disagreeing. And that's where, just a little relationship tip for anyone that's listening, it's like we come together as a couple because their strengths are the things for us to learn from them, vice versa. We leverage each other's strengths because that's where the most growth is, I believe, because that's unconsciously within us. It's like I have become more agreeable, but I can be disagreeable if I think what makes me disagreeable is if my integrity and my compassion is more important than being a yes man or agreeing, because I know my passion is sometimes saying to someone, hey, you are choosing to stay where you're at. And that's a compassionate say, because if you're not growing, you're dying. So you need to be called forward in that way. So, and that's a heart thing. So I love that, because it's not like a mind thing. How do I get them to do this? It's like, no, I care about you. That's a heart thing. And that's why I'm disagreeing. And that's what's gotten me there to start to disagree more.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the things I'm hearing in that as well is what has allowed you to really tune into that, perhaps, is, yes, I might be disagreeing with someone or something out here, but that is because I'm actually agreeing with something that is more aligned in my value set here. And so therefore my choice is. And perhaps historically, I know I can speak for this personally, and this might be your experience as well. Maybe I'm agreeable externally, but what I'm actually doing is, disagreeing or moving away from my own value set. Is that
100%, bro? Yeah,
correct for you? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I think, like developing the relationship with myself, which I believe everything stems from, is like staying true to that.
So then when it comes to your relationship, and as an example of some of the relationships that you work with, there's many factors, of course, but let's explore this one. As you said, like you generally, when tested and then, upon history and practice, far more agreeable, and your wife is less. And so there's learnings for her from you and vice versa. And then in the practicalities of navigating things, how do you navigate that?
Of her being less agreeable.
Yeah, and you being more, and potentially, missing each other, or one facing the potential of having to, am I the one having to step out here or give here, or maybe there's many different contexts that could dictate that, but there's still a very different level on that agreeableness.
Yeah, well, there's like I teach communication tools and techniques as one way to approach that, but I also know for certain that however each of us are feeling will trump that 96 times out of 100. So how do I navigate that? Well, because I've done a lot of learning and understanding of how I can look at that as a paradox. Like I can appreciate that. If I look at something as one-sided, as she's disagreeable and it's a bad thing, it's a negative thing. Or if I look at something as one-sided as she's disagreeable and that's awesome, that's amazing, I'm missing the point that nothing comes as one-sided. And so I'm going to miss that. But that sort of balanced perspective actually also gives me balanced emotions, balanced clarity of how to handle situations. It doesn't mean I get it right every time, but a great example is like I went to I went to the effort of like discovering this about us. Great test. You can do Jordan Peterson's Big Five personality test. And then we found out what our strengths are, because like that was the thing that would get to me, because she would just argue about everything, or she would disagree. But then when I realized, oh shit, people who are less agreeable, they make more money because they're more competitive, etc. That's the benefit. But then the disagreeableness is when you're doing that, you can't be empathetic and focus on someone else at the same time. So now, like how she leverages my strengths is, while she's doing that and battling, I need to go, oh, hey, hang on, what could have made this person do that, and gain more understanding. So she's not sort of, that competitiveness will come with some aggression that might be like exhausting her if she keeps doing that all the time. But a great little story is we went on a date, and after we knew all this, we went to a restaurant, the Tropic Night, and she went and sat on the grass. I went and ordered tiramisu cake. She loves it. I went up to the front. It was lunchtime, and the manager said, "We don't do takeaways." And I said, "You've done takeaways before?" And she goes, "No, you must have gone to another restaurant, the restaurant next door." So I call Jess up and I say, "She said she doesn't do takeaways." She goes, "Ask her again. We've done it before." And I went up to her and I said, we're sure that we got takeaway from you before. And she said, "You know what? Let's do it this time for you." And the manager was a bit annoyed, I could tell. But
yeah.
They wanted to,
gritting her teeth a little bit.
They wanted to keep up appearances. It's a really high quality
restaurant.
Anyway, my point is, like, I walk back with the cake and she goes, "Yes, disagreeableness," like, and that was because I might not have gone back. I would have just let it go. And that's my agreeableness. But her persistence, and that's a metaphor for like anything that happens in a relationship. Like with the big dreams, the goals that we have, she's going to fucking persist on them, when I might sort of back off a little bit, because I'm still learning when to be disagreeable, like we were talking about. So does that answer your question?
And I think a great example, and I often find that examples like that, let's call them seemingly innocuous, simple little things in life, often give us so many learnings and can speak to those bigger pieces. And I love that she was able to celebrate that in that moment, and therefore a little lesson for you in there as well. Like, oh yeah, okay, what is the actual consequence if I choose to be disagreeable here, right? And of course, label it what you want. And the woman says no. I can handle that, and her discomfort and annoyance at doing the thing, right?
That's right. And I want to say one other thing, like, if there's any man listening, can he relate to this? I grew up, and my brother has talked about this as well. We grew up in a kind of, well, it is said that a family will be kind of like attuned to the one sort of key big emotion, one or two in the household. For us, it was definitely our dad's anger. Like, he would work late after he'd been working all day. He'd be like fixing the car or something, and everyone would be like, "Oh, stay out of Dad's way." Everyone would go quiet. So control the whole house. It would dictate the whole house. And so I believe that who we attract in our relationship has the things that the behaviors that we have. You marry your unconscious mind, right? Like, that's what Jung said. So I believe that when she's so disagreeable, and I see that, I perceive the aggression from her, that's for me to like take that gift and use it as a productive tool, because I had a lot of experiences where it was like, oh, that person's scary because they're angry. Whereas that's the beautiful gift for me, is like, that is beautiful, that anger, because that has so much power to produce amazing things within it, whether it's a tiramisu cake one afternoon, or it might be an extra sale, more money for us to provide for the family, or or
someone's safety or whatever, right? We often demonize, for everyone, I think it carries different levels for men and women, right? But we demonize something like anger, and it can be wholly destructive. And it certainly is when we weaponize it and it's unprocessed. But anger is a very important emotion because it fucking moves us into action, to simplify it, right? And the other thing I hear in that, as you said about the unconscious mind, is like it feels like we're narrowing your wife down to one trait, disagreeableness, which I know is for everyone is not the case, but as one example, in that is such a learning and healing for you based on your environment growing up. Like there was some responses in you to that energy, and oh, hello, here's a lovely opportunity to deal that, confront it, heal it, and be able to move to the other side of it. Start to integrate that yourself.
Yep, 100%. I'm curious, like out of all the men you've worked with, have you seen like a consistent challenge there for them, or what the kind of meaning they've given to it, or how it's sort of held them back or not?
I think probably the it's kind of like a yes and no, like a bit of variance. And maybe to really just try and simplify them very, very broadly would be like, I am angry and I have anger issues, and there's an identification around it. And at the same time, a really huge challenge to understand it and navigate it and explore it. And so we just end up weaponizing it externally or internally. I kind of talk about it, like if I don't digest that thing, I'm either going to shit my pants or I'm going to vomit it out somewhere else. Right. And so there's that challenge on how it shows up internally or externally in their life, or so that's often the outer version of it, the vomiting or the shitting the pants, to the point of I've learned that it's such a bad thing and there's all the shame around, and so I just keep carrying it. I just keep carrying it, and I never process it to the point that I don't ever think that anger is an issue for me, but actually what's under the hood there is a fucking whole lot of unprocessed and undealt with anger. Yeah. But to the point that you're making it, around in the family, there's often perhaps one or two big emotions. It makes me think of there's a piece in the book Iron John by Robert Bly. I'm not sure if you've read that. I don't know if we've ever talked about it. And he speaks about this point. In essence, he really says this: there's usually one mood in the household, and that becomes the biggest mood. And so, of course, mood, we're talking about a strong emotion in essence. And one of the things that happens as a consequence is the child's mood gets pushed down, suppressed, diminished, shrunken, put to the back burner, so that because everything really orbits around this other mood often in one of the parents. And, I think I hear a little bit of that in your story there. It's like, oh, so one of the things that I've actually being invited historically and maybe now in your relationship to explore is, where have I dampened that level of, in this context, disagreeableness in myself, because I had to just not even deal with it because I had to orbit, or not even explore it or honor it because I had to orbit around my father's.
100%. Yeah. It's like, and I think like, that Jordan Peterson quote, it's nothing like rung so true for me. It's like a dangerous man is not, the most dangerous man who is the one who doesn't have any sort of physical ability about him to defend himself or defend others. It's the one that is the most dangerous without having it under voluntary control. So I think like, and that's the challenge, right? Men need to like tap into that savage killer, but also, and we see the danger. I think the challenge there of society is like, well, yeah, we want the killer must also have that under very good control, and that takes a lot of amazing male role models which we need more of, and integration of all of the scary stuff that happened for men when they were boys that might still be dictating actions, they're not even aware of it.
Big time. And we're still always being modeled, right? Like, it's really easy to look back at what was modeled to me, and whilst that is heavily important, we also miss that I'm always still looking for examples and being modeled too, right? And the men that I surround myself with now and so on is still so important. It's
such a good point that you say, because I don't think a lot of people even like ever think about it, right? Like, I think that's minority.
We're an adult now, so all that stuff's taken care of. I'm just I am who I am, right? Is that kind of, I think, a very dangerous area we fall into.
Yeah, and it's like, if someone, in my experience, like if someone learns, they're like, oh, who were my role models as a kid? Not how am I modeling, how how people modeling from my behavior now, and vice versa. And I think that it's another thing is like the biggest hack is change your environment. It's like you literally become the people you hang around. Like that's not just a saying. I think like 90% of the time we're going to be unconscious and going about our day. We're going to all of a sudden adopt what the people around us believe and all the attitudes. And
if you want to become something or step into something more or strengthen something, you've got to witness it. Like you have to witness it. Otherwise, if it were only what again, it's very important what was modeled to me and what I went through. But if it were only that, then I'd go, I want to develop more disagreeableness. Fuck, I wasn't modeled as a child. I'm fucked. And of course not. You've got to be surrounded by it. Not necessarily, but potentially in a relationship where it's modeled, maybe quite frequently. But I love what, I know we're running out of time and for everyone, I think this is a window into so much when we start to talk about, like my friend Traver, to the quote that you're sharing from Jordan Peterson. Traver puts it very simply: be dangerous and not a danger. And in that is so much, right? The peaceful warrior who can learn to be dangerous, but also has, for lack of a perhaps better term, control and maturity over that thing. And there's a lot in that. I remember in a teaching somewhere, Francis Weller talking about, I think it was maybe the Maasai, a culture somewhere where before a boy is taught the ways of a warrior, he has to first learn to be a poet. He has to learn the ways of poet, dance, and justice before he has a sword put in his hand. And then, how he is with that sword is wholly different to if he just gets a sword as an adolescent.
100%. Yeah, that really resonates.
Right. You hear it and you're like, of course, but we certainly don't have a society that does anything like that at the moment. And is it realistic? Who knows? But I think one of the things that we're potentially learning is that we can certainly explore more of ourselves, what has been maybe, conditioned into us, what has been stuffed away and sacrificed, and what could be explored and learned and developed.
Yeah, I think definitely we need controlled initiation, like for young men, boys from the elders of the tribe that we've now banished to aged care nursing homes.
Yeah, right. And of course, in the realm of what you're talking to, not just for an individual, but relationships. What we modeled, well, obviously a parent's relationship or lack thereof was the major modeling. And so whilst that has a big impact on us, obviously we can be surrounded by people who model different types of relationships and relating.
100%. Yeah.
Darren, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we need to cut because of our timing. So do you want to tell everyone, we'll put links and stuff everywhere, of course, but a little bit about, perhaps where people can find you and what they might be able to maybe access.
My pleasure, bro. I really appreciate the conversation. My website is darrenbruce.com.au. It's probably easiest to reach me on Instagram. Darren J. Bruce is my Instagram handle. And if you want to connect to improve your relationship or become a better role model or whatever, let's do it.
Or handling those incredibly tricky situations sometimes with toddlers who have not yet developed the skills to understand their emotions, which of course is understandable given that a lot of us struggle with that too, right?
Yes, definitely.
Darren Bruce, thanks for coming on the show. You absolute legend.
My pleasure, bro. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. If this podcast has benefited you, if you enjoyed this, then my invitation is to share this with a man that you think will also benefit from this and enjoy this. Remember, please, wherever you find your podcast, to like us, subscribe to us, click download first, leave us a review. All those things both make sure you get all the updates when they come in, and it supports us in getting this podcast in front of more everyday men that could use it. Until next time, I've been Mike Campbell. Remember to build that legendary integrity, and remember, everyday men We thrive when we are championed, when we are supported, when we are appreciated and recognized for who we choose to be in the world. Here is my invitation to both show up and be that everyday legend, and to continue to champion the everyday men in your life.